Picture this. You're standing in the dusty archives of the Vatican, surrounded by countless volumes of forgotten history. The air is thick with the weight of centuries, and somewhere in these endless corridors lies a document so bizarre, so controversial, that the Church has spent 700 years pretending it doesn't exist. A parchment that rewrites everything you thought you knew about the Knights Templar and reveals a secret so shocking it could have toppled kingdoms. What if I told you that the most famous military order in history, the Knights Templar, weren't destroyed because of greed or heresy, but because they discovered something that threatened the very foundation of medieval Christianity? What if their legendary treasure wasn't gold or silver, but knowledge so dangerous that it had to be buried along with them? You've heard fragments of this story before. Hollywood movies, conspiracy theories, best-selling novels. But beneath all the fiction lies a document that historians whisper about in academic corridors, but rarely discuss in public. It's called the Chinon parchment, and when it finally surfaced in 2001, it shattered everything scholars thought they knew about the fall of the Templars. Tonight, we're diving deep into one of history's most carefully guarded secrets. We're going to uncover the truth about what the Templars really found in the Holy Land, why the Church was so terrified of them, and how a single piece of parchment, hidden in the Vatican's secret archives, changes the entire narrative of medieval Europe. But to understand why this document is so explosive, you need to know what really happened on that fateful Friday the 13th in 1307. Because the story you've been told about greedy kings and corrupt knights is only half the truth. The year was 1307, and King Philip IV of France was drowning in debt. The Templars, once humble warrior monks, had become the most powerful financial institution in Europe. They owned vast estates, commanded fleets of ships, and their treasuries overflowed with wealth accumulated from 2 centuries of crusading. Philip owed them a fortune, and the interest was crushing his kingdom. But here's where the official story starts to crack. Philip wasn't just a desperate debtor. He was a man who had heard whispers, rumors that filtered down from the highest levels of the church hierarchy. Whispers about what the Templars had discovered during their decades of excavation beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. You see, the Templars weren't just protecting pilgrims and fighting Saracens. For nearly 20 years after their founding, they spent most of their time digging, tunneling deep beneath the ruins of Solomon's Temple, searching for something specific. The official records are vague, claiming they were simply securing the site, but archaeological evidence tells a different story. Modern excavations have revealed an extensive network of tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, tunnels that match perfectly with contemporary accounts of Templar activities. These weren't defensive positions or storage areas. They were methodical, almost surgical excavations designed to reach specific chambers deep underground. And then, suddenly, everything changed. Around 1128, the Templars stopped digging and began their rapid transformation from a small band of 9 knights into the most powerful organization in Christendom. Their wealth exploded. Their influence spread across Europe like wildfire. Popes blessed them, kings feared them, and common people whispered that they possessed powers beyond the natural world. What had they found down there in the darkness beneath Jerusalem? The Ark of the Covenant? The Holy Grail? Ancient scrolls containing lost gospels? The theories are endless, but one thing is certain. They discovered something that gave them leverage over the church itself. This is where our mysterious document comes into play. Because when King Philip moved against the Templars on October 13th, 1307, he wasn't acting alone. He had the full backing of Pope Clement V, who issued papal bulls authorizing the arrests and trials. But here's the twist that historians have struggled to explain for centuries. If the Templars were truly guilty of the heresies they were accused of, why did the Pope secretly absolve them? The Chinon parchment, discovered in 2001 by researcher Barbara Frail in the Vatican's secret archives, reveals that Pope Clement V had privately granted absolution to the Templar leadership years before their public executions. Think about that for a moment. the head of the Catholic Church, the man who authorized their destruction, had already forgiven them in secret for the very crimes they were being burned alive for committing. This document doesn't just contradict the official narrative, it demolishes it completely. It suggests that the entire trial was an elaborate charade, a carefully orchestrated cover-up designed to hide something far more dangerous than financial corruption or religious heresy. But what could have been so threatening that it required the complete destruction of the most powerful military order in history? What secret was worth sacrificing the Church's reputation and the lives of thousands of innocent men? The answer lies in understanding what the Templars represented to the medieval world. They weren't just soldiers or bankers. They were living symbols of a direct connection to the Holy Land, to the very ground where Christ had walked. Their authority came not from earthly kings or even from Rome, but from their sacred mission to protect the holy sites. And if they had found something in those tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, something that challenged the Church's version of early Christian history, it would have posed an existential threat to papal authority. Imagine if they had discovered documents proving that the Gospels had been altered, or that early Christianity was fundamentally different from what the Church taught. Imagine if they had found evidence of bloodlines, of descendants, of truths that would have shaken the foundations of medieval society. This is why the Chinon parchment is so significant. It proves that the Pope knew the Templars were innocent of the charges against them. It shows that their destruction was not about justice or purging corruption, but about protecting something far more valuable than gold: the Church's monopoly on divine truth. The document itself is written in Latin on parchment, bearing the official seals of Pope Clement V. It's formal, bureaucratic, almost mundane in its language, but hidden within its careful phrases is a confession that changes everything we thought we knew about medieval Christianity. When Pope Clement granted secret absolution to Grand Master Jacques de Molay and the other Templar leaders, he was admitting that they were not heretics, not devil worshippers, not corrupters of the faith. They were simply men who had stumbled upon knowledge that the Church could not allow to see daylight. But the story doesn't end with the Templars' destruction, because secrets have a way of surviving, even when their keepers are burned at the stake. The question that has haunted historians for 7 centuries is this: what happened to the Templar archives? Where did all their documents, their maps, their carefully guarded knowledge disappear to? Some fled to Scotland, where they found protection under Robert the Bruce. Others vanished into the forests of Switzerland or the mountains of Portugal. But wherever they went, they carried with them the memory of what they had discovered in those tunnels beneath Jerusalem. And perhaps, just perhaps, they carried the physical evidence as well. This brings us to the most intriguing aspect of the Chinon parchment. It's not just what it reveals about the past, but what it suggests about what might still be hidden. Because if the Pope felt compelled to secretly absolve the Templars while publicly condemning them, there must have been other documents, other evidence that required similar protection. The Vatican's secret archives contain over 50 miles of shelving, holding documents that span nearly 2,000 years of Church history. Most will never see the light of day, but every few decades, something surfaces that forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew. The Chinon parchment was just the beginning. The discovery of the Chinon parchment opened a door that scholars had been trying to unlock for centuries. But like most secrets buried in the Vatican's endless corridors, it raised more questions than it answered. Because hidden within the careful Latin phrases and official seals was something even more disturbing than papal duplicity. There were references to other documents, other testimonies, other pieces of evidence that painted a picture so complex it made the official story of Templar guilt look like a children's fairy tale. Dr. Barbara Frail, the researcher who uncovered the parchment, spent years deciphering not just the text itself, but the context surrounding its creation. What she found was a web of connections that stretched far beyond a simple case of medieval politics. The document revealed that Pope Clement had conducted secret hearings with the Templar leadership, hearings that were never recorded in the official trial transcripts. These private audiences weren't just about granting forgiveness. They were intelligence-gathering sessions. The Pope was trying to understand exactly what the Templars knew, what they had found, and most importantly, what they had done with it. Because by 1307, rumours had been circulating for decades about Templar discoveries that went far beyond mere treasure. Contemporary accounts speak of strange rituals conducted in Templar chapels, ceremonies that bore little resemblance to standard Catholic liturgy. Witnesses described initiations involving mysterious objects, sacred relics that were never displayed publicly. Some spoke of a preserved head that was venerated in their most secret ceremonies, while others mentioned ancient scrolls written in languages that predated Latin or Greek. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. The Chinon parchment contains references to testimony from Templar knights who claimed their order possessed documents that revealed the true nature of Christ's mission. Not heretical documents, mind you, but authentic historical records that told a different story than the one proclaimed from every pulpit in Europe. Imagine the implications. The Catholic Church had spent centuries building its authority on a specific interpretation of Christian history. The Pope was not just the successor to St. Peter, but the sole legitimate interpreter of divine will on earth. Any evidence that challenged this narrative, any proof that early Christianity was more complex or diverse than the Church claimed, would have been catastrophic. This is why the Templars had to be destroyed completely. It wasn't enough to simply disband them or strip them of their wealth. Every trace of their discoveries had to be eliminated, every witness silenced, every document burned. The very thoroughness of their destruction speaks to the magnitude of what they threatened. But destroying an organization is one thing. Destroying knowledge is something else entirely. And this is where the true mystery begins. Because despite 7 centuries of searching, no one has ever found the Templar archives. Tons of gold and silver, countless precious artifacts, libraries full of manuscripts, all vanished without a trace on that October night in 1307. The official explanation is that the Templars spent everything on their military campaigns, that their wealth was largely imaginary, inflated by their enemies to justify the seizure of their assets. But financial records from the period tell a different story. The Templars were not just wealthy, they were the medieval equivalent of a multinational corporation. Their assets were distributed across thousands of properties, their treasures stored in fortified commanderies from England to Cyprus. Some of those treasures have been found over the centuries, but always in small quantities, always missing the most significant pieces. It's as if someone had systematically removed the most important items before the arrests began, and according to the Chinon parchment, that's exactly what happened. The document reveals that Pope Clement had been in secret communication with Templar leadership for months before the October arrests, warning them, coordinating with them. The language is carefully ambiguous, but the timeline is clear. The Templars had advance notice of what was coming, and they used that time wisely. Modern historians have identified at least 18 Templar ships that left French ports in the weeks leading up to October 13th. Their destinations were carefully chosen. Scotland, where the Church's authority was weakest. Portugal, where they were quickly reformed under a new name. And some, according to fragmentary records, sailed west into the Atlantic, toward destinations that wouldn't be officially discovered for another 2 centuries. This brings us to one of the most intriguing mysteries surrounding the Templar legacy. Because scattered across Europe are architectural anomalies that suggest their influence survived long after their official destruction. Churches built with impossible precision, incorporating mathematical principles that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Renaissance. Cathedrals designed with acoustic properties that create specific harmonic frequencies during religious ceremonies. These aren't accidents or coincidences. They're signatures, messages left in stone by master builders who possessed knowledge that officially died with the Templars. knowledge that may have originated in those tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, in scrolls and tablets that revealed the true scope of ancient wisdom. The Chinon parchment hints at this surviving network through its references to faithful servants and trusted guardians. These weren't just political allies or sympathetic nobles, they were initiates, men who had been entrusted with preserving specific aspects of Templar knowledge, even if the order itself was destroyed. And here's where the document becomes truly explosive, because it suggests that the Catholic Church didn't just know about this network, it helped create it. Pope Clement's secret absolution wasn't just about clearing the Templars' names. It was about ensuring that certain knowledge would survive, carefully controlled and monitored, but preserved nonetheless. Think about the implications of that revelation. The same institution that publicly burned Templars as heretics was privately ensuring that their most important discoveries would endure. It suggests a level of duplicity and long-term planning that transforms our understanding of medieval politics completely. But why would the Church take such an enormous risk? Why preserve knowledge that was dangerous enough to justify genocide? The answer may lie in the nature of that knowledge itself. Because what if the Templars hadn't discovered something that challenged Christianity, but something that validated it in ways the medieval Church wasn't ready to accept? What if those tunnels beneath Jerusalem contained evidence of early Christian communities that practiced their faith differently than Rome prescribed? What if they found proof of female apostles, of married clergy, of traditions that had been systematically suppressed as the Church consolidated its power? Such discoveries wouldn't have destroyed Christianity, but they would have revolutionized it. They would have forced the Church to acknowledge that its version of the faith was just one interpretation among many, that the apostolic succession claimed by the Pope was not the only legitimate lineage connecting modern believers to Christ himself. This interpretation explains why the Chinon parchment is written with such careful ambiguity. Pope Clement was walking a tightrope, trying to preserve dangerous knowledge while protecting the institution he led. The secret absolution was his way of acknowledging the Templars' innocence, while ensuring that their discoveries would remain hidden until the world was ready for them. But ready for what exactly? And when would that readiness be determined? The document provides no clear answers, only hints and suggestions that have kept researchers busy for decades. Because buried in the Vatican's archives are other documents, other parchments that reference the same mysterious knowledge. Some speak of a great revelation that will transform human understanding of the divine. Others mention a time when hidden truths will emerge to guide humanity through a period of spiritual crisis. The language is prophetic, almost apocalyptic, suggesting that the Templars' discoveries were not just historical curiosities, but keys to understanding humanity's spiritual destiny. And perhaps most intriguingly, several documents reference a countdown, a carefully maintained timeline that suggests these revelations are not meant to remain hidden forever. The Templars, it seems, were not just guardians of ancient knowledge. They were custodians of a plan that spans centuries, possibly millennia. The question that haunts every researcher who has studied the Chinon parchment is whether that plan is still unfolding, whether somewhere in the world the descendants of those faithful servants and trusted guardians are still waiting, still watching, still preparing for the moment when humanity will finally be ready to learn what lies buried beneath the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount. The implications of this timeline become even more disturbing when you consider what else was happening in Europe during the 14th century. The Black Death was sweeping across the continent, killing a third of the population. The Church's authority was fragmenting as competing popes claimed legitimacy, and in the midst of this chaos, strange new ideas were beginning to surface in the most unexpected places. Alchemical texts appeared seemingly overnight, containing mathematical formulas and scientific principles that wouldn't be officially discovered for centuries. Architectural techniques emerged that allowed builders to construct cathedrals of impossible complexity using tools that should have made such precision impossible. And scattered across Europe, mystery schools began forming that claimed direct lineage to ancient wisdom traditions. But here's what makes the Chinon parchment truly terrifying to contemplate. Hidden within its formal language are references to specific dates, astronomical calculations that correspond to celestial events occurring centuries in the future. Not predictions or prophecies, but precise mathematical formulations that suggest whoever wrote these documents possessed knowledge of cosmic cycles that extended far beyond medieval understanding. Dr. Frail discovered that these calculations weren't random. They corresponded to a complex pattern that aligned with solar eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and other astronomical phenomena that wouldn't be accurately predicted until the development of modern astrophysics. Yet here they were, recorded in a 14th century document by men who officially possessed nothing more than basic literacy and military training. This raises the most unsettling question of all. Where did the Templars acquire such sophisticated knowledge? Their official history claims they were simple knights who took vows of poverty and dedicated themselves to protecting pilgrims. But the evidence suggests something far more complex, an organization that served as a conduit between ancient wisdom and medieval Europe. Archaeological investigations of former Templar sites have uncovered artifacts that don't belong in the medieval period. Stone carvings that incorporate mathematical principles from ancient Egypt and Babylon. Metal objects forged using techniques that required temperatures medieval furnaces couldn't achieve. And most mysteriously, inscriptions in scripts that predate known writing systems by thousands of years. The Church's response to these discoveries has been telling. Rather than conducting open investigations or publishing findings, Vatican archaeologists have quietly removed artifacts and sealed excavation sites. Official explanations cite structural concerns or conservation requirements, but researchers have noted a pattern of suppression that mirrors the original treatment of the Templars themselves. This systematic concealment suggests that the knowledge preserved in the Chinon parchment represents just the tip of an iceberg that threatens to sink our entire understanding of human history. Because if the Templars really did discover evidence of advanced ancient civilizations, if they found proof that human knowledge has been deliberately suppressed and cyclically reset, it would revolutionize everything we believe about human development. Consider the implications. What if the Dark Ages weren't a period of ignorance and decline, but a carefully orchestrated concealment of knowledge that certain groups deemed too dangerous for general humanity? What if the Renaissance wasn't a rediscovery of classical learning, but a controlled release of information that had been preserved in secret for centuries? The Chinon parchment contains references to what it calls the Great Work, a project that transcends individual lifespans and encompasses multiple generations of initiates. The language is cryptic, but it suggests an ongoing effort to gradually prepare humanity for revelations that would fundamentally alter our understanding of reality itself. This preparation apparently involves more than just preserving ancient texts or maintaining secret societies. According to the document, it requires the careful manipulation of historical events to create conditions favorable for what it terms the Great Awakening. Wars, plagues, technological developments, even religious movements appear to be viewed as tools in service of this larger plan. The most chilling aspect of this revelation is how it reframes major historical events. Were the Crusades really about reclaiming the Holy Land, or were they a cover for archaeological expeditions designed to recover specific artifacts? Was the Protestant Reformation a genuine spiritual movement, or a calculated strategy to weaken Catholic control over information? Did the scientific revolution emerge naturally from human curiosity? Or was it guided by guardians releasing carefully selected knowledge at predetermined intervals? These questions become even more pressing when you examine the document's references to modern times. Because the Chinon parchment doesn't just describe historical events, it anticipates future developments with an accuracy that defies rational explanation. Technologies we've only recently developed were apparently known to medieval initiates who understood their potential implications centuries before their invention. The document mentions devices that capture and transmit human voices across vast distances. It describes mechanical minds that process information faster than human thought. It references weapons that harness the power of the sun itself. These aren't vague prophetic utterances, but technical descriptions that correspond remarkably to modern telecommunications, computers, and nuclear technology. But perhaps most unsettling of all, the parchment suggests that these technological developments were not accidental discoveries, but predetermined stages in humanity's guided evolution. Each innovation represents another step toward what the document calls the final convergence, a moment when hidden knowledge will merge with public understanding to create a new form of human consciousness. The timeline for this convergence appears to be approaching rapidly. References in the document to the time of great revelation correspond to astronomical calculations that point to events occurring within our current century. Not distant future possibilities, but imminent realities that may already be unfolding around us. This interpretation explains why the Vatican has been so secretive about the Chinon parchment's full contents. Because if the document really does contain a roadmap for humanity's spiritual and technological evolution, releasing it prematurely could either accelerate the timeline beyond safe parameters or create mass panic as people realize how little control they actually have over their own destiny. But secrecy has its own dangers, because if the plan described in the parchment is already in motion, if we're really approaching a convergence between ancient wisdom and modern capability, then humanity needs to understand what's happening before it's too late to influence the outcome. The question that haunts everyone who has studied this document is whether we're witnessing the fulfillment of a benevolent plan designed to elevate human consciousness, or the implementation of a control system designed to manage humanity's development for purposes we don't yet comprehend. Either way, the Chinon parchment suggests that the story is far from over. The Templars may have been destroyed, but their mission continues through channels that remain hidden from public view. And somewhere in the Vatican's endless archives, other documents wait to be discovered that will reveal just how deep this rabbit hole really goes. Because the Chinon parchment was never meant to be the end of the story. It was meant to be the beginning of a much larger revelation that would transform our understanding of human history, spiritual reality, and our place in a cosmos far more complex than we've ever imagined. The question is whether we're ready for that transformation, and whether we have any choice in the matter. Choice in the matter. So, here we stand, 7 centuries after that fateful Friday the 13th, staring into an abyss of questions that the Chinon parchment has torn open before us. This single document, hidden for decades in the Vatican's most secret vaults, doesn't just rewrite the story of the Knights Templar. It shatters our understanding of medieval Christianity, exposes a web of deception that reaches the highest levels of papal authority, and suggests that the forces which destroyed the Templars may still be operating today. The parchment proves that Pope Clement knew the Templars were innocent, yet allowed them to burn anyway, to protect something far more valuable than their lives. But perhaps most disturbing of all, it hints that this conspiracy wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Somewhere out there, the knowledge that the Templars died protecting continues to pulse beneath the surface of our reality, waiting for the moment when humanity is finally ready to face the truth about what really lies buried beneath the Temple Mount.